Welcome back. Today I'll be going over chapter 14 of Alanna Nash's book, Baby Let's Play House, Elvis Presley and the Woman Who Loved Him. Chapter 14 is titled Nipper Dreams. 19-year-old Anita Wood grew up in Jackson, Tennessee and embodied the ideal Southern sweetheart. She was beautiful and talented and poised, and as Elvis would soon learn, had a strict code of ethics. Elvis had asked Lamar to call Anita that Saturday and ask her out for Elvis that night after her dance party show. Anita told Lamar, "I'm sorry, I already have a date tonight." She had a date with Jimmy Omar. Stunned, Lamar said, "You mean you won't break a date to go with Elvis Presley? Are you crazy?" Anita, a DJ who would play Elvis's records, wasn't an Elvis fan, and she told Lamar, "Well, I don't believe Elvis would like that if I did that to him." Anita didn't think she'd hear from Elvis again, but the following Monday, Lamar called again, asking her to go out with Elvis, and this time she said yes. Growing up, her parents were strict and sheltered her, and she never had a serious boyfriend. Now living in Memphis, she rented a room from an older woman named Miss Patty, who was like a second mother to her. When a car pulled up for their date and there was a knock at the door, it was George Klein on the porch who said, "I'm here to pick up Anita." Miss Patty was not having it and told him, "No, I'm sorry. If Elvis wants to see Anita, he'll have to come to the door and pick her up." George went back to the car, and then he and Elvis came back to the door, and the sight of Elvis took Anita's breath away. Anita remembers, "He was effervescent, absolutely the best looking man I've ever seen before or after." Miss Patty brought the men into the living room and told them, "Now you have to have her back at a reasonable hour." Otherwise, Anita couldn't go with them. When Anita got in the car, she was surprised to see their date also included Lamar and Cliff Gleaves, too. Elvis drove around with no particular destination and at one point pulled in front of the Strand Theater and showed her a giant cutout of himself to promote Loving You, which was scheduled to premiere the next evening. After that, they drove to Crystal's hamburger stand where the boys inhaled 36 hamburgers. Anita didn't care for the little square burgers, so she declined to eat. After that, Elvis asked her if she wanted to see Graceland. Anita said, "I said, sure, I'd love to. I felt really at ease because of the guys in the back seat that I knew." Once at the house, Elvis gave her a pink and black teddy bear from a large box filled with them. They were promotional items for his double-sided single, Teddy Bear, and Loving You, which had sold 1.25 million copies in a week. He introduced her to his parents and Minnie Mae, and then he played the piano, and they listened to music. He gave her a tour of the bottom floor, then said, "Come up, I want to show you my office." Once he showed her the office, he led her into his adjoining bedroom, which she found to be very dark with the navy blue drapes. She saw his giant bed and he told her he had to have special sheets made for it. He sat her down on the bed and began to kiss her, which shocked her because people didn't kiss on the first date back then. She didn't like it. She didn't care who he was. And then, quote, "His hands moved just a little bit where I didn't think they should have been." She told him, "I think I need to go home now." And he didn't put up a fight. A couple of nights later, Elvis invited her to a private screening of Loving You with his parents. On another day, he showed up in his old panel truck and took her down to Lauderdale Courts to show her where he grew up. And afterward, they stopped by Chenault's for hamburgers. After that, they spent almost every night together, even if it was just hanging out at Graceland and watching TV. Nash writes, quote, 5 days after that first date, Gladys invited Anita for dinner. She liked this girl and she told Elvis not to let her get away. Elvis liked her too. He talked baby talk with her. "I just ate that up. He treated you like you were a doll." And because she stood only 5'3" and weighed 110 pounds, Elvis affectionately called her Little or Little Bit. He referred to himself as the Thing. After a couple of months, Elvis was very serious about Anita. After walking her to her porch one night, he told her, "Little, I think I'm falling in love with you." A diamond and sapphire ring soon followed after, and then he bought her a 1957 Ford automobile. Initially, Anita wasn't sure if she was in love with him too because they hadn't really spent much time alone. Some of the guys, like Lamar, lived at Graceland, and his cousins, Gene and now Billy, were always there. Lamar would even sometimes sleep in Elvis's room to make sure Elvis didn't sleepwalk, and Elvis and Gene spoke in this strange language all the time. When they would go to the fairgrounds, Elvis would invite everyone in the house and even some people at the gates. By now, his entourage included Alan Fortis, who Elvis met through George Klein and who he called Hog Ears. Marty Lacker, who had attended Hume's and knew Alan and George and Red, would eventually join the group too, along with 15-year-old Jerry Schilling, who would sometimes play football with guys at Guthrie Park. Elvis was enchanted with Anita and bragged about her to the guys, and he was pretty sure she was a virgin. Nash writes, quote, Elvis was not alone in appreciating Anita's attributes. That summer, the Memphis Press Scimitar ran a photograph of half a dozen girls who would compete on August 22nd in the Mid-South finals of the Hollywood Star Hunt, a beauty talent contest that the newspaper sponsored with the Strand Theater. Of the 6, Elvis had dated 3, Barbara Hearn, Anita, and Barbara Pittman. Anita won and would go on to New Orleans and win the grand prize, a 7-year contract with ABPT, American Broadcasting Paramount Theaters, which also entailed work with Paramount's movies, television shows, and record label. Elvis was happy for Anita, although he did tell her the things that went on in California were the things that went on in hell. Anita learned that Elvis was a jokester. One morning about 6 a.m., Elvis and Anita were returning from a fun but rough and tumble time at the roller rink where just about everyone was battered and bruised. Alan and Lamar were in the front seats, and Elvis and Anita were in the back. Elvis whispered into Anita's ear, and then she leaned forward and said, "Hey, y'all, my CUNT hurts." Alan and Lamar weren't sure if they heard what they thought they heard and were stunned silent. Anita said, "Did y'all hear me? I said my CUNT really hurts." Elvis fell on the floor laughing, barely able to catch his breath, and he had a Pepsi in his hand that went all over the seat. The men were all laughing. Elvis had told her that now that she was going to Hollywood, she had to know the LA word for behind, for the rump, and her rump was sore. Anita said, "He loved to pull tricks. I was so embarrassed when I found out what I'd said. It's not that I was dumb. My family didn't talk ugly words, and I was just very naive." Anita was also naive about Elvis's faithfulness. A couple of weeks before the finals of Hollywood Star Hunt, he brought recently divorced starlet Venetia Stevenson to Memphis. Anita remembers, "He'd always come to me and say, 'But little, you know these are just publicity stunts. It doesn't mean anything. You're the only one I care anything about.'" She wanted to believe him and added, "And gullible me, Elvis could make you believe anything." Anita moved into Graceland in 1957 and lived upstairs. And the guys weren't sure if Anita actually slept with Elvis because there were 2 bedrooms on the second floor. But they figured she was too proper to do anything before marriage. And besides, Gladys would not have appreciated anything like that going on under her roof. But Elvis was Elvis, and when Anita wasn't around, he was doing Elvis things. Marty Lacker said, "One time Anita went out shopping and Elvis brought another girl upstairs. He was fooling around with her in the bedroom when all of a sudden one of the guys called up and said, 'Hey Elvis, Anita's coming through the gate.' If you looked out his window, it was a straight drop to the ground, so we put a ladder up to the window. He let the girl climb down first, and he waited about 5 minutes, and then he went down. Anita came in and went upstairs, and of course he wasn't there. He walked around the back of the house to the front and came upstairs behind her. He said, 'Oh, you're home. Great.' He would do stuff like that all the time." When Anita did find out about the other woman, she was naturally hurt, but rationalized it, saying they were all available and it was a great temptation, and he succumbed to it. And Elvis was her first love. When she realized they'd be apart when she went to California for the movie role, she no longer wanted a career. She said, "He called me on the phone. 'Little, I miss you. I want you to come home.' Well, I just said, okay. He met me at the airport." That was the end of her career. But she wasn't that heartbroken because she, quote, "Really and truly, I just wanted to get married and have children and be a normal person. Well, with Elvis, you could never be normal. I found that out right away." Then there was Tom Parker, who forbid Elvis and Anita from even staying at the same hotel when she visited him in California. Parker told Elvis that he would lose his fans and instructed Elvis to tell people he and Anita were only casually dating, nothing more. As for being photographed together, if they were, Anita was not to look at the camera or Elvis. Oh, and Parker didn't want her to appear happy in photos together either. Nash writes, quote, "But there she was, right behind him, smiling like a newlywed backstage at the Tupelo Fair in late September. The colonel chomped hard in his cigar, but nobody seemed to notice. They were talking about those big pelvic thrusts that Elvis did on stage. Wow, where did he learn to do that?" On October 28, 1957, Elvis performed night one of two shows at the Pan Pacific Auditorium in Los Angeles, and per Nash, gave the most incendiary performance of his career, but he also scandalized himself in a lascivious display that surpassed anything the majority of his audience had ever seen. Byron Raphael wrote in a later article for Playboy magazine, quote, "The colonel had put me on nipper control that night, which meant he positioned me beneath the stage and charged me with the safety of a 3-foot-high plaster of Paris canine, the infamous cocked-eared Jack Russell mascot of RCA, Elvis's recording label. Elvis was going to use the pup as a prop during Hound Dog. Whatever you do, don't let that dog fall off the stage," Parker snapped. "And tell Mr. Presley you're going to hold Nipper up so he doesn't have to worry. He can just be free." The colonel often said Elvis has stardust, meaning that it was remarkable how such a shy person could change himself into a creature of infinite magnetism on stage. But the old hustler never dreamed what Elvis was planning to do with man's best friend. Elvis came out on stage with his now famous gold lame jacket, topping a pair of loose-fitting black dress slacks. During his 50-minute 18-song set, he wiggled, bumped, and twisted, according to Jack O'Brien of the New York Journal American, one of many out-of-town papers that covered the event. But it was the finish of Hound Dog that prompted another paper's headline: "Elvis Presley will have to clean up his show or go to jail." I don't know exactly what got into him, but as he launched into that song, he was vastly different from the Elvis I knew at the studio. His eyes were dilated as if he were taking his direction from someplace far, far away. Then he did the unthinkable. Pumped up by either adrenaline or libido, he began to unfasten his pants and slowly pull his zipper down, which prompted wild screaming from an audience that was already frenzied at the sexual surge Elvis sent out through the auditorium. With his pants now open but not down, Elvis reached for Nipper, which I still held tight from below the stage. Suddenly, Elvis pressed the dog against his crotch, and I could feel him pushing it back on me as he rode the pooch back and forth in a masturbatory glide. As the crowd noise grew to a furious roar, Elvis continued to dry hump poor Nipper as if he were a teenage girl at a drive-in. Then all of a sudden, Elvis pulled the dog out of my grip and then began rolling around on the floor with him in full simulation of bestial bliss. It was one of the most shockingly erotic things I'd ever seen. There's no question that Elvis was truly trying to have sex, because when he finally gave the dog back to me, I could see a huge hard-on through his pants. The next night, the LA Vice Squad came armed with warnings, and the police filmed the show. But Elvis toned it down, and Nipper made it through without undue violation. When the article was published, several people discounted Byron's version of that night, calling it an exaggeration. Elvis's show the following evening was much more tame, since the police had shown up with the movie camera to record his performance. Elvis would use hand gestures instead of hip movements and told the audience, "You should have been here last night." The show was still very entertaining, though, for the audience members, especially for 11-year-old Sherilyn Sarkeesian. Sherilyn would grow up and find her own career as a singer and, like Elvis, go by one name, Cher. Cher had watched Elvis on The Sullivan Show and remembers, "I was a goner. I loved the way he sang and the way he looked. In some strange way, I felt he expressed who I was." Growing up, she was a tomboy, but a girly girl at the same time. She loved to sing, but her voice was too low to sing with the girls and too high to sing with the boys. She didn't quite fit in, so she sang for herself. That's what she got from Elvis, too. And she said, "When I saw him, I thought, well, this is kind of who I am." Her mother was unlike other mothers when it came to Elvis. Cher's mom, Georgia Holt, liked Elvis's music and watched the Sullivan Show with Cher. Then when Elvis came to their town to perform, Georgia bought them both tickets to see his show. Cher said, "I was so crazy I got my hair cut for it because I hoped he would notice it. I was in such heaven I almost didn't walk on the ground." Cher remembers during the performance, "All the girls were on their chairs screaming. I didn't understand why exactly. I wasn't completely sure about the sexual part of it. but I was just fascinated with it. I remember saying, "Mom, can we stand on our chairs and scream too?" And so we did. My mom was yelling and laughing, and I projected myself up there. It didn't make much difference what sex he was. The Pan Pacific shows was supposed to be the last of the tour, but Parker agreed to book 2 more shows in Hawaii around the same time Jailhouse Rock opened in theaters. The concerts would take place in Honolulu and at Schofield Barracks, Pearl Harbor, and would be his last performances before going into the military. Nash writes, quote, "Every branch of the military service made bids for Elvis to join their ranks, offering perks of one kind or another. Elvis and the colonel decided on the Army, which offered a 2-year enlistment with a 120-day deferment so he could complete his new movie, Paramount's King Creole. He'd begin shooting it in January with Hungarian director Michael Curtis, most famous for Casablanca. On Parker's orders, Elvis went to the Memphis Draft Board to pick up his notice personally. Parker said it would make Elvis look more patriotic and would earn respect from parents across the country. When reporters asked him about entering the military, Elvis told them, "It's a duty I've got to fill, and I'm going to do it." But Barbara Pittman, who Elvis had planned to take on the road with him, said, "Elvis cried in my lap because he had to go into service. He had to go into the service. Parker had said, 'Look, son, you play the hero. If you start battling it and try to get out of it to support your mother, it's going to make you look bad. Just be the all-American kid type.'" The draft board chairman, Milton Bowes, sent Elvis an informal letter letting him know that his induction notice had been completed and was ready for pickup. Anita said Gladys and Vernon were devastated. She said, "They could not believe that he was going to have to leave them. He didn't mind going and serving, but he really didn't want to leave his family. And his mother was so worried about what would happen to him. She did not see another happy day after they received that notice." The newspaper came out and took pictures of Elvis. In one of the photos, he's holding the draft notice, and in another, Elvis appears to be sneering. But other than that, he made it appear that everything was okay and gave gifts out to family and friends. He gave Gladys a mink coat, and Vernon got a diamond ring, and Parker got an Isetta sports car. Billy and Bobby got $100 each. Billy remembers, "The whole Christmas was like a kid's dream." Just a couple of years before, the Smith kids had gone to the Goodfellows dinner for underprivileged kids. Now Aunt Gladys had all types of holiday foods to eat, and the house was beautifully decorated. Anita recalls it was a fun time, and Gladys forced herself to get into the holiday spirit for her first Christmas at Graceland. Anita said, "She would look at Elvis and grit her teeth and talk this baby talk, and he would do it back to her. They were gritting their teeth at each other." Gladys told Elvis and Anita that she hoped the two would be married and have a blonde-headed baby on the way by next Christmas. Anita said she and Elvis discussed children, and if they were to have a girl, they'd name her Alisa Marie, A-L-I-S-A, Alisa Marie. Gladys wanted a boy named Elvis Jr., and Anita said of Gladys, she said, "I can just see him running up and down the driveway in his little bare feet." She was trying to plan Elvis's future, not having any idea of things that were going down. Unlike his younger self, who was quick to propose marriage, Elvis, now 23 years old and the most famous person in the world, was in no rush to get married. Lamar said, "As kids, we were taught that you grow up, get married, and smoke cigarettes. That's just what you did." But he really didn't want to get married because we'd go on the coast and he'd get loose and chase everything that was moving. In early 1958, Anita joined Elvis in New Orleans for his filming of King Creole, his 4th film, but she didn't go on set. Instead, she stayed in her hotel room per Parker's orders. On the set, Elvis met 17-year-old June Wilkinson, a big-bosomed brunette from England who was friends with the film's choreographer. June said, "Elvis came over and started talking to me, and he said, 'Would you like to have dinner?' A 17-year-old girl, of course I would like to have dinner." He had someone pick her up from her hotel and bring her back to his hotel, where he asked if she would like to see his suite. June said, "He started kissing me, which was okay with me, and then he wanted to make love." But June was a virgin and had no intention of changing that. She thought Elvis was going to send her home when she told him no. And she said, "He said, 'Oh, okay,' and sat me on his bed, got out his guitar, and sang to me for a couple of hours. I was so impressed. He knew he wasn't going to get any place with me, and it didn't matter." Nash writes, quote, "King Creole, based on Harold Robinson's gritty novel A Stone for Danny Fisher, offered Elvis a magnificent role as a young singer navigating the mob-controlled New Orleans club scene. His work reflects his close study of Brando and Dean and finds him worthy of leading a first-rate cast, including Walter Matthau as Maxie, the crime boss, and Carolyn Jones, Maxie's jaded mistress, who also has a soft spot for Danny. Jones remembers he was always asking a lot of questions. God, he was young. He was always talking about his folks and the house he just bought them. Dolores Hart also had a role in the film, and Elvis again expressed interest in her, but they were more like siblings than lovers. After the film wrapped in March of 1958, Dolores would never see Elvis again, although he would write her postcards when he was in Germany asking, "What's doing, hot lips?" It was an inside joke from a kissing scene they had to do in 104-degree weather. An entertainer named Philip Stonick, who was born on December 24th, 1961, and calls himself Elvis Presley Jr., believed he was the son of Dolores and Elvis. But now Stonick says his mother was the late actress Angelique Pettyjohn, who was an extra in Elvis's 1961 film Blue Hawaii. So I always find it interesting when people make claims about their parentage. Like, was this guy adopted and that's why he doesn't know who his mom is? Dolores has always insisted there was nothing romantic between her and Elvis. And in 1959, she was quoted in a magazine saying, "Elvis is a young man with an enormous capacity of love, but I don't think he has found his happiness. I think he is terribly lonely." Years later, in 2003, she shared one of her favorite memories of Elvis while they were shooting Loving You. She said, "There were some horses around and we were just laughing and enjoying being out there. He was standing by a rail and he had his arms reaching out each side of it. He put his head back. He was looking up to the sky, and he was so beautiful and real. And for a moment, he just looked so peaceful." Nash writes, "Elvis had finally found some footing in a world he himself had turned upside down. Now the army was about to separate him from everything that mattered: his fame, his career, and most of all, his deathly ill mother." That's it for chapter 14. Stay tuned for chapter 15, which is titled Private Presley. See you then.